Bong Joon-ho's long-awaited follow-up to Parasite opens in Malaysian cinemas on Thursday, March the 6th. I say long-awaited because this movie finished shooting in January of 2023, I believe, went into post-production, and then was continuously delayed by Warner and Zaslav for reasons that are beyond me after watching this movie. At first, I was concerned that maybe it wasn't good. Maybe Mickey 17 was a Bong Joon-ho failure. That's why they kept delaying the damn release of the movie. And then after watching it, I can confidently say that it is one of his best works and probably his best English movie to date. So, I don't know what Zaslav was thinking, but in this one, Robert Pattinson plays Mickey Barnes, or the 17th version of Mickey Barnes, along with the previous 16 versions of Mickey Barnes. So Mickey Barnes, who is a desperate person, escapes Earth and signs up to be on a space station / spaceship heading to another planet as an expendable. Not a Sylvester Stallone, Arnold Schwarzenegger style expendable, but a sci-fi expendable, meaning that they can clone his body when one dies and he will be left to do all of the hardest tasks on this spaceship / space station. He will be set up as a guinea pig for experimentation. He will be sent out into space to do dangerous work because he is an expendable. That is the basic gist of the plot. It is based on a 2022 novel by Edward Ashton called Mickey 7. Bong Joon-ho decided 7 wasn't enough, so he added another 10, and that's why this movie is Mickey 17. And along the way, the movie becomes this sci-fi, political satire, black comedy, all of the things that Bong Joon-ho does best. What Bong Joon-ho isn't is subtle. He's never really been subtle or nuanced in any of his work. He kind of slaps you in the face with all of it. And I think with a lot of other filmmakers, we would probably be critical of that. But he is such a master of his craft. And I say master of his craft because there are moments in this film that are executed so perfectly with regards to weight and comedic timing and messaging all rolled into one. It's so smart, it's so clever that you can look past all of his obviousness. I fucking love this movie. I had a blast. I was like laughing out loud throughout. It is so good.
Bong Joon-ho's messaging as a director is, yes, quite upfront, but he doesn't preach about it. Like Snowpiercer isn't preachy. It's not even an allegory. It's a story about global warming or the coming ice age and how political class structures is not the best thing for a society. It's very obvious. You don't have to try very hard to see these things. However, it is not preachy. It is not the point of the movie. The movie is still entertaining. It's still a ride and a half. But then on your second and your third watch, because it was so much fun, you watch it multiple times, and that's when you really pick up on the other stuff. And I'm not saying he's hiding it, but it's not preachy. It's not a message movie, and I love that about him.
And can I just say, this is what Mickey 17 does so well in that it is a lot of fun.
Yeah.
Like, there's a lot of shit going on in this movie, right? There's character drama, there's political satire because of Mark Ruffalo and Toni Collette's character, there's a romance happening between Naomi Ackie and Robert Pattinson, there's a conflict happening between Robert Pattinson and Robert Pattinson, there are these strange creatures out in this ice planet that they find themselves in. Like, there's a ton of stuff. And the way that he juggles all of these elements is so seamless. Like, in the hands of a lesser director, balls would be dropped.
Yeah.
And yet, by the time you reach the end of this movie, you feel incredibly satisfied. Like, the story was well told. Everything wraps up very nicely for you. There is a message there that you can take away. And let me tell you, one of the unintended consequences of Warner Brothers delaying this movie so much is that it came out at a time when it is probably more politically relevant than ever before, especially for Americans. I say especially for Americans, not just because of Trump, but because of the character that Mark Ruffalo plays, who is this politician who is somewhat of a loser, but who is worshipped by the class who happen to be on this spaceship. And I say it's new for Americans because for the longest time, Americans aren't used to these sorts of hero pedestal politicians, right? We're used to it. We do it all the time in fucking Malaysia, even I think in South Korea. I think Trump is a new breed of politician in America. And it's something that the rest of the world, Philippines, Malaysia, all of us, like Indonesia, we see that on the yearly. The Mark Ruffalo character feels very familiar to us.
The loser leader that is controlled on one hand by maybe by his wife, but then also on the other hand, maybe by a group of corporations behind him. Yes, you're right. It's not familiar. However, I think none of that detracts from what is essentially a very, very good story. You're right. There's a lot of things happening, right? And of all the things you mentioned, you also forgot there is also a monologue, voiceover, diary style storytelling that he's doing, that the movie opens with essentially Mickey, I think it was Mickey 17, going backwards, telling you the story. So it's not linear, and then he jumps back and forth with it. And none of that becomes complicated or confusing because it's all there as just extra bits of fun. It never detracts from the main story that is happening, which is where we are towards the end of the film. And I think that storytelling form is what makes this as interesting to watch.
Yes.
Bong Joon-ho, by going back and forth a little bit, by telling side character stories, I think that's what makes it interesting and makes the time in the cinema go by a lot quicker, I think.
And also just shrouding it in a sci-fi satire means that you can get these messages across as well. And all of this kind of speaks to Bong Joon-ho's preoccupations as a director. He's always been very political, as you can tell with Okja, Snowpiercer, Parasite, and even with Mickey 17. And there are multiple political threads here. Mark Ruffalo was just one of them, the politician that we kind of hero worship. And then, of course, there is this idea of the expendable worker, which we are seeing more and more of now with all of the things we order from Temu and Shein and all that stuff. and I think what Bong Joon-ho does well is that, like you said, Bahir, on multiple viewings of this movie, there are all of these other layers to these characters. Like on the first watch, you get a very depressing comedy in the sense that you're laughing out loud, but then when you think about it a little more, you're like, oh, if this is a reflection of the world we're living in, that's pretty dire. But then on a second watch, you kind of get the deeper implications of character that he's drawn with Naomi Aki, with Mickey's 1 through 16 and then 18. And then also the philosophical stuff regarding death and dying and what it means to keep being reborn, if that's even a thing. And there's this whole Ship of Theseus argument happening as well, as in who is Mickey? Is he the same person even though he has the same memories as before? Is he different? How does his personality change? There are moments in this movie when I kept being reminded of the Michael Keaton film Multiplicity.
Oh yeah.
And I don't know if some of Bong Joon-ho's comedic takes were inspired by that movie, because part of the story there was that Michael Keaton keeps cloning himself. And then when the clone makes a clone of the clone, that becomes a dumber version of the original. And so everyone has a different personality despite being cut from the same genes.
Yeah.
Like there's a lot going on in this movie.
Yeah.
And it's not heavy. It's very cleverly constructed. There is an overarching plot, like you talked about, Bahir, with the main story involving this travel to the other planet and these creatures there, etc., and warmongering and politicking and all of that stuff. But I think you can take on this movie from so many different ways. Like I was thinking about what to say in this review and why I liked it, and I was struggling because every time I thought about a different element, it felt like a different review for a different movie. In the hands of a lesser director, this wouldn't have worked. It would just be klankabot and messy, and we would be criticizing him for not being focused.
Or criticizing him for being too much, to trying too hard. For trying to cover too much ground in an action-packed movie, for being the wrong genre for it. You know what it is? It's the kind of comments we had for Don't Look Up.
Yes.
It was trying too hard to be a story about impending humanity's doom and blah, 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 but also not quite, because there's a love story in there, and then Timothée Chalamet shows up in the supermarket. So it feels too messy. It's like there's the ironically, it was the Donald Trump-Elon Musk relationship, maybe about 3 years too early, but it became all of that. You're right. It became messy. It became too many little bits that never really go anywhere. Whereas I think with Mickey 17, the focus on Mickeys 1 through 18 and how their relationship with the other non-expendable characters is what makes it interesting and very focused.
Obviously, Bong Joon-ho, good job, director, well done. But I think the reason this works as well as it does is Robert Pattinson. He's doing something in this movie, and it is very, very good. Like, we hear Mickey 17 in the trailer, and he's already got an interesting take with his voice, with his cadence, with how he's decided to play that character. And that's only because you haven't met the other Mickeys yet. And he's doing versions of himself, as in versions of Mickey Barnes. And it's very, very good. Like, each version is only subtly different from the last. It's not like he's doing a pompous version, as an idiot version, and a comedic version, and a ragey version. He's not doing that.
Which is the Michael Keaton multiplicity problem,
Yes.
right? Because then it would be too much. Whereas here, it's not until much later do you learn something about the Mickeys. And I think that's what's interesting.
It's really good. Like, I didn't know what to expect, and I was pleasantly surprised throughout. Like, I didn't know how this movie was going to end. So I haven't read the book, but watching the movie, I think every, let's call it twist. It's not a twist as in like a Sixth Sense Usual Suspects twist, but every plot turn had me interested.
I was also going to say that this is one of those movies that I look forward to rewatching over the years.
Right? Yeah.
Yeah. Because it's not too dramatic. It's not overly preachy. It's not loud. It's not big. It's just, let's watch Mickey die again and again and again. It's fun.
The one thought I had was, how would we have reacted if this movie came out last year when it was supposed to, pre-Donald Trump's victory? And then what if this movie came out in a reality where Kamala Harris had won? Because I think our reactions would be very different. Because I think whenever we see a Trumpian-style politician in a film, pre-Trump, it almost looks like farce.
Yes.
But then, because reality is so closely mirroring this fiction, it then becomes something scary. Like, I think if we had watched Civil War 10 years ago, not Captain America Civil War,
Yep.
but Civil War from last year, I don't think it would be as scary because it would feel like speculative fiction.
It's like watching the first season of The Handmaid's Tale.
Exactly.
This is terrible. Oh my God, men are terrible. And then as the seasons go on, you go like, holy shit, this is America.
Yeah. Like watching Civil War after what happened on January 6th suddenly makes you feel, oh wait, this is actually just 2 steps away from actually happening.
Yeah, they can do this.
I think Mickey 17 is a really interesting movie to watch in the current context because I think it was always Bong Joon-ho's intention to satirize those individuals, the kind of individuals on the ship that hero worship Mark Ruffalo's character and the Rosma-ish Toni Collette, for example. But at the same time, watching it in an American reality, because for the most part, that's the kind of thing that white people laugh at that happens in the third world.
Yes.
But now it's happening in their own little first world.
Yes.
And I think that's why this movie comes at such an interesting time.
Yeah.
Completely unintentional, but, good for Bong Joon-ho. But yet again, like Snowpiercer, like Okja, heck, I think even to a certain extent Parasite, you can watch this movie on two levels. I think there is a base appreciation for what this movie is as a sci-fi black comedy. Just like Snowpiercer as an action film, I think you can watch it just as that without reading too much into it and still enjoy the film. But you can also look a little deeper and get so much more from it. It was just a lot of fun. Like, I had such a good time watching these characters, and I was laughing louder than I have from a lot of comedies these days.
Yeah, no, absolutely, you're right.
The other thing I have to say, this movie is fucking harsh. It is unapologetic. It does some dark shit to poor Mickey.
Yeah, but also I think it goes back to what you were saying earlier about the expendable class of humanity, right? Even Mickey has gotten to that point where he accepts he is an expendable. When they're about to dispose of the body and one of the scientists go, hey, hang on, he's still alive. And Mickey just goes, nah, it's fine. They'll just print me out again. He has accepted his lot in life so much that he has given up on life because death has no meaning. Life has no meaning for him, right? He will die, he will live again ad infinitum. And I think that's interesting as well.
There is a great line in the movie, and I won't give it away, but there is a fantastic line in the movie when Mickey 17 and Mickey 18 are confronting each other, and Mickey 18 asks Mickey 17, what's the big deal? You've died 16 times before. Why don't you want to die this time? And his response, I think, was absolutely brilliant.
Shatter you.
It changed my conception of the movie from that point on.
The movie changes because now it's no longer the same. Ugh.
It's very good. Go watch Mickey 17. It is now showing in Malaysian cinemas. It is showing on all screens. I think it is definitely worth watching on IMAX. I believe it's also showing on Screen X. I don't know what that's going to be like, but if any of you check it out, let us know. We are really, really curious. You can reach out on Instagram. We're GogglerMY. You can also email us on podcast@goggler.my or send us a WhatsApp on the Goggler hotline 012-524-5208. Thank you so much for listening. This is the Goggler Podcast.